Welcome to session 3.2. My name is Anna Goslin, and I'm going to be moderating today's session. We'll have two 20-minute presentations, and up first we have Finding a Way, Improving Access to Materials on Indigenous Art of the Americas, presented by Alice Whiteside, Sarah Levinson, and Denise Sufi from UNC Chapel Hill. And then second, we'll have Beyond Band-Aids, Rethinking Accessibility Widgets, presented by Meredith Nguyen and Eric Olson from NC State. These presentations are being recorded. We're going to hold questions until after both presentations. Please remain muted during the presentations to minimize background noise. Live captioning has been enabled. Participants can hide captions by choosing Hide Subtitle on the live transcript menu at the bottom of the screen. And with that, I'll turn it over to Alice, Sarah, and Denise for our first presentation.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you all for joining us. Denise is going to start up our slides here. Our presentation is titled Finding a Way, Improving Access to Materials on Indigenous Art of the Americas. I'm Alice Whiteside, head of the Sloan Art Library at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill.
I'm Sarah Levinson, the Latin American and Iberian language cataloger at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill.
Denise, are you here? I know you're here.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm Denise Sufi. I'm the metadata librarian for Middle Eastern languages.
And go ahead to the next slide. Thank you so much, Denise, for being our slide conductor today. So this project was sparked by my experience working with two undergraduate classes in fall 2017 and fall 2018, taught by the late and much missed Dr. Jenny Tone-Pahote. A first-year seminar on American Indian art in the 20th century and an upper-level seminar titled Makers and Meanings, Indigenous Arts in the Marketplace. These classes visited the art library for a research orientation geared towards a specific research assignment. In the first year seminar, students were researching works of art from the collection at the Ackland Art Museum, many of them drawings and paintings by artists from the San Ildefonso Pueblo in New Mexico. After the instruction sessions, as the students worked on their research assignments, I saw a lot of Jenny's students for follow-up research consultations. As those of you who have done library instruction know, it's not uncommon to have students, especially first-year students, show up saying, I can't find anything. And usually some simple guidance and a few tips are all they need. When I sat down with these students, my go-to tips weren't sufficient. For example, find one book using the catalog, and when you go get it off the shelf, look around for other books on the same topic. Or here are the subject headings in the catalog record. You can use them to find other books on the same topic. The library had the books the students needed, but the subject headings were often useless. Often it was just Indian art. The books themselves were not necessarily shelved together. Some were in the art library and some were in Davis Library, our main library, and some were classified in the N's and some in the E's. So there were 4 locations. The second year, I shifted my teaching, focusing more on keywords, on following bibliographies, but I was still seeing a lot of Jenny's students. These books really were harder to find. After working with Jenny's classes for 2 years, I was thinking a lot about the shortcomings of Library of Congress classification and subject headings in the context of 20th century Native American art, and specifically how those shortcomings were affecting these students who were doing a simple introduction to research assignment. I'm not a cataloger at all, and I wanted a cataloger's perspective on the issue. So I talked with Monica Figueroa, who at the time was our music cataloger. It was a great conversation and led to a deep dive into the topic in the form of a literature review. Monica and I presented, go back.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Monica and I presented this work in a poster format at the 2019 IDEAL conference and also the 2021 Arliss and 8 conference. On this slide, there's a tiny URL to our bibliography, and I'll just highlight a few points drawing from our poster. While much has been written about problematic subject headings in Library of Congress, a discussion of the absence and lack of subject headings particularly resonated with what we were seeing in these classes, what I was seeing. We were interested in what other libraries were doing in response to these and similar problems, and the interventions we explored were wide-ranging, from cataloging, including looking beyond Library of Congress, to teaching. Our readings emphasize that there really isn't a way to fix the problems of Library of Congress, that biases are a feature, not a bug, and a process of continual learning and reflection is really important in this work. Our literature review included readings on cultural humility to clarify our approach and goals. We acknowledge that neither of us have lived experiences of being Indigenous or Native people. An approach of cultural humility reminds us that our goal is not to achieve perfect solutions, but to engage in continuous learning, reflection, and improvement. We had some great conversations at both of these conferences, and the main takeaway question was, what next? What do we do? Through this research project, acknowledging that the problems were inherently unfixable, we identified some clear steps we could take to improve access at UNC, adding subject headings and reclassing materials to be in one location instead of 4. And here's where silos come in. This was basically on the back burner for me, a project I would love to get to, but wasn't sure how it would happen. As I mentioned, I'm not a cataloger. Monica had taken on a new leadership role as interim librarian for inclusive excellence and was no longer in resource description and management. When the UNC libraries announced the Idea Action grants, I thought it might be an opportunity to get money to hire a graduate student interested in cataloging and collaborate with someone in the cataloging department to supervise them. I attended one of the ideation sessions where committee members shared information about these grants and invited participants to share about their projects and connect with potential collaborators. It was a good thing I did. Someone from Resource Description and Management said, we don't need to hire a graduate student. This is a project our DM can take on. So I was invited to a Resource Description and Management department meeting and talked with them about the impact of the lack of subject headings and also how these materials were scattered across campus. Sarah and Denise basically took it from there. I'm so grateful for their work on this and really excited we have the opportunity to share it with you today. And with that, I'll hand it over to Sarah and Denise to tell the next part of the story.
Sarah, you need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I thought I had. Apparently it didn't work. Thank you, Alice. Before we set our priorities, we were able to meet with Dr. Rashad, who'd been recommended to us by the American Indian Center on campus to briefly discuss the issue and to give us some guidance as to what the problems were and what some of the solutions might consist of. This meeting helped us to decide on just what we could do and what we might be best leaving for now. Unsurprisingly, there are many different opinions as to which term may or may not be better to use. Although he did feel that things were moving towards Indigenous over Indian, he emphasized that the main thing we might be working on would be making it easier to find things on these subjects without a user having to do numerous searches using as many different terms as a person could think of. His advice served as a guide as we created a plan to increase access to this collection. First thing we had found was that although work might be about the work of a specific tribal group, some of the records did not name that group at all in the subject headings. We decided that part of the enhancing that we would do would be to get specific. Second, SAGO authority work would be done when called for to create C references for existing tribal groups for whom those were readily available, particularly if we knew that the group referred to itself by a name that did not appear in the authority record. We would create and submit proposals for tribal groups for which we had material but who did not have authority records, as well as for the art of tribal groups when such headings did not exist, or for a specific artistic endeavor of the group, for example, beadwork or weaving, for which we held material. Third, we also felt that where possible, most specifically in resources that spoke about contemporary art, contents notes, especially those mentioning the names of individual artists and their tribal affiliations, would allow keyword searching that might prove helpful in many instances. Fourth, it also made it clear that getting as much of the art material that is classified in the E and Fs, which is the history schedule, into the Ns, which is the art schedule, would be very helpful. Once we drew our conclusions as to where we needed to focus our efforts, we needed to figure out exactly what we were going to attempt to do and how to implement that action. There were a lot of people who needed to be taken into consideration, and we needed to find out how this extra activity would fit into their individual workflows. These included Alice and her staff at the art library, people who'd handled transfers as we were planning to send materials from general collections at Davis Library to the art library and from the art library elsewhere to make room for those materials. The people who handle relabeling, and the people who physically move the books from one library to another, the mailroom personnel. A large number of library personnel contributed to this project. We organized the work into 4 phases. All of the books in the project were going to need to be reviewed to see if the subject headings in the records included individual tribal groups and types of art, for example, pottery or textiles, to add them if they weren't there. Most of this could be done without actually looking at the books, but at all phases, specific books were pulled when necessary to add contents notes or to verify that the information we were gleaning from the catalog record was correct. Phase 1 consisted of the N-class books that were not going to need to be either transferred or reclassed. Phase 2 dealt with the N-class books in the Library Service Center. All of the work done for the first 2 phases would need to be done also for phases 3 and 4, with the addition of reclassing them to integrate them into the rest of the art created in the Americas. This meant that they would need to be pulled from the shelves, relabeled by preservation, and reshelved in different areas. The people at the art library would need to make space for books from Davis and reorganize their shelf space to accommodate the reshelving of the materials they already held. Phase 3 consisted of E and F class books in Davis. Because of the space constraints, we limited those to books that were not primarily archaeological. Phase 4 were the E and F class books in the art library, which needed to come to Davis for relabeling before they could be returned to the art library to be shelved in the ends. Denise will now show you some examples of how we did this work.
Thank you, Sarah. The guidelines we followed for adding subject headings were similar to the guidelines for subject headings in general. We added more specific headings for tribes or art genres if the work focused on 1 or 2 of these. Anytime we added the name of a tribe, we also added the corresponding art term. As for SECO work, whenever we found or added the name of a tribe to a bibliographic record, we either checked its authority record for the completeness of its cross-references or created a new record if one did not exist. We also created records for art qualified by tribe when needed. Here's an example of the authority record for Cherokee Indians before and after our enhancements. The original record contained no alternative names as cross-references. Our colleague Wanda Gunther did extensive research and was able to document 9 alternative names. Adding these cross-references greatly enhances the accessibility of this subject heading by providing variant names and spellings. For modern Indigenous art, the names and often the tribal affiliations of the artists can be found in the resource. When it appeared from the bibliographic record that the resource might have names of artists, such as exhibition catalogs, we pulled the item and added contents notes listing all the artists with their affiliations. For our last task, we reclassified books currently classed in E to F, the history schedules, into N, the art schedules. As Sarah mentioned, this was done only for books in the art library in Davis. All this bibliographic enhancement and reclassification was largely done without pulling the books off the shelves. So you may be wondering how we switched the call numbers. The new numbers were added into a special field in the item record. Then when the relabeling part of the project began, they were inserted into the call number field using a batch process. We created documentation to reflect this alternate classification, not only for our project, but also as local guidelines for future cataloging of Indigenous American art. And we kept track of all the new call numbers and reconciled them once this part was completed. At this point, it is still too soon to know what impact the project is going to have. While subject headings were added to a significant number of records, at least half of the books were general in scope and did not require enhancement. We also added some extensive contents notes, which will hopefully improve access to specific artists. We expect the most impact in the reclassification. Almost 600 books were reclassified, and 200 of them were transferred from Davis to the art library. We hope that consolidating the collection in the art schedules, as well as in the art library, will help users to more easily locate the materials they need. One area where we hope to see an impact beyond this project is in the ability to search by cross-references in the subject headings. As Sarah mentioned, in our initial consultations, we learned that being able to search by the many variations of a tribe's name is crucial for access to any materials on the Indigenous peoples of the Americas. However, in the course of this project, we discovered that this is not possible in UNC's discovery layer as it is currently configured. For example, users can search for materials on Cherokee Indians using only the term Cherokee and not one of the 9 variations which were added to the record. The staff working on user experience have been notified, and we hope to see a change in this area. Lastly, we recently heard the good news that the Library of Congress is beginning a large project to reassess subject headings for Indians and names of tribes, a project which will likely involve the participation of a number of institutions. We are gratified to know that our decisions for approaching these subject headings are adequate for now, and we hope to participate in the Library of Congress's reassessment in the future. I'd like to conclude by expressing our thanks to all the people whose work contributed to this project, namely staff at the Art Library, the American Indian Center, Resource Description and Management, Wilson Library Technical Services, Preservation, and Strategy Assessment and Space Planning for book delivery. Thank you, and we'd be happy to take your questions at the end of this session.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. Let's see. I'm just going to switch us over here to our next presentation. Meredith and Eric,